Did Nephi drive away the Spirit of the Lord? Let's talk about that. Some contend that in Nephi's vision in 1 Nephi 11, the reason that the Spirit of the Lord left Nephi is because Nephi asked to know the interpretation of the tree, when he should have asked to taste the fruit of the tree. But we have 13 reasons that suggest otherwise. Now first, in order to be fair, we need to take some time to lay out the background and the argument against Nephi. This will take a minute, but it's necessary to develop the points.
The context here is after Lehi has his famous vision of the tree of life. 1 Nephi chapter 11 begins with Nephi pondering the things his father had seen. He's thinking about the dream. He wants to understand it. He got caught up in the Spirit of the Lord.
Yeah, up to a high mountain.
The Spirit of the Lord is present with Nephi and asks him what he desires. And Nephi says, I want to see what my father saw. There are a few more remarks. The Spirit now shows Nephi the tree. And he asks Nephi again, what do you desire? And here's where the controversy begins, because Nephi says that he wants to know the interpretation thereof. The Spirit then tells him to look. Nephi looks, and the Spirit is gone and doesn't return in the vision. This is the key point.
And Nephi looks, he sees Jerusalem, he sees Mary, an angel descends and talks to Nephi. And the vision continues, chapter 11, 12, 13, 14. And the angel asks Nephi a bunch of questions, shows Nephi an expansive vision, including the birth of Jesus, John the Baptist, the ministry of Jesus, his crucifixion, ministry to the Nephites, destruction of the Nephites. He sees America being discovered. He sees things that he is not allowed to write that will be written about by John.
The issue arises because people wondering why in this vision does the Spirit leave and an angel comes and walks Nephi through the rest of the vision. And the argument is that the Spirit leaves because Nephi, when he's asked what he wants, says he wants to understand the dream instead of saying he wants to taste the fruit.
Grant Hardy put it this way: when the Spirit of the Lord showed Nephi the tree and asked what he wanted, it would not have been unreasonable for Nephi to respond, I want to taste the fruit. I want to experience that exceedingly great joy. Instead, he asks for knowledge, to know the interpretation thereof. The Spirit leaves, an angel takes over, and in the end, Nephi is wiser but not happier. After citing Grant Hardy and Rosalind Welch on this point, Jared Halverson, in his Unshaken podcast, put it this way. His treatment's fairly lengthy. I've attempted to cut it down to make it manageable without misrepresenting anything he's saying.
Something about Nephi's response seems to have sent the Spirit away. He didn't completely end class, but the teacher left and sent a substitute teacher instead. What's going on there? And the way Rosalind described it, I absolutely love, because it has to do with different epistemological models. If Lehi's model was an experiential one, you've got to participate in this and partake of it and taste it. Tasting it, you internalize it. You have to experience it for yourself. It's amazing. And that's Lehi's epistemology. So you can picture Lehi saying to Nephi, son, don't just ask cerebral questions. Experience the taste of this fruit. Eat it. And you can picture the Spirit hoping for the same thing. And so when it's like, okay, now you've seen it. You know it's there. What do you want now? To understand what it signifies. And you picture the Spirit like face palming, like, seriously? That's it? You want exegesis instead of experience? You want to understand, but not to internalize? Well, any old angel can do that. I got plenty of old historians waiting around the spirit world. Any one of those can come and walk you through it. I'm out. And the Spirit leaves and the angel comes. To have the kinds of spiritual experiences that change us from within. That's what eating does. You are what you eat. So eat this fruit. Okay, Nephi? Nephi has settled for something less. And so the angel comes as substitute teacher and says, I'm going to do what practically anybody can do, since you didn't want the one thing that only the Holy Ghost can give you. Again, I'm not trying to throw Nephi under the bus, but I am trying to see for ourselves, how does this story apply? What approach am I taking to learn the things of God?
Brother Hardy and Brother Halverson are not the only two that have taught this, but they are prominent and they give a good example of what we're responding to. But please don't get us wrong. We're not criticizing them personally. We don't know them. We have nothing against them. We can only assume they are faithful, good men who love the Lord and love their families and are doing their best. We happen to disagree with them on this issue. We are certainly open to pushback if somebody thinks that we're misreading something or otherwise are wrong, and we can only assume they are as well. We really hope this doesn't come off as being mean or abrasive or contentious. We really hope it comes off as friendly pushback. With that said, let's dive into the text. Let's see if the scriptures support these charges against Nephi.
So we have a number of points. The first thing we want to say about the fact that Nephi chose to have an interpretation of the vision rather than to taste the fruit himself is this: there is no fruit. And that was a dream. Lehi was asleep at night. There isn't anything to taste. It was a dream experience that symbolizes something, right?
And that's clear because Lehi expresses his concern about Lemuel and Lemuel, not that they missed out on a delicious treat, but that they might be cast off from the Lord. So there wouldn't be any confusion by the time Lehi is done with 1 Nephi 8 that this wasn't a literal expression. Everybody listening would know there's something deeper going on here.
Exactly. Nephi knows that it's a purely symbolic fruit.
You can't eat a metaphor. If Nephi were to say to the Spirit, I want to taste the fruit, that's like Nephi if he saw a representation of the 10 virgins saying, I want to hold a lamp. Like, there is no lamp. There is no fruit.
Lamps were made up to make a point.
Yeah.
The fruit is making up a separate point. It would be so much weirder if Nephi prayed for understanding, got caught up in a vision, and then said, I want to taste that. The Spirit would probably have said, there's a misunderstanding here. The fruit was just a symbol. I thought you were here to understand the symbol.
Yeah.
You want to eat?
Yeah.
That'd be way weirder.
Think about Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, and the solution to the king's problem wasn't for Joseph to step into the dream, grab some dream corn, and bring it back to feed the people. There wasn't any corn. And, relatedly, because it was symbolic, you can look at Nephi's life. He had partaken of metaphorical fruit. He'd already been visited of the Lord after he cried unto him. Then he was led by the Spirit to get the brass plates.
This man is close to the Lord.
Yeah.
He is obedient. He is prayerful. Everything he has done up to this point shows how much he has partaken of the fruit. His devotion to the Lord is very real, and it's not going to be improved by eating dream fruit. In Lehi's dream, Nephi does partake of the fruit, and Nephi knows this, and the Spirit knows this, and the angel knows. Everybody involved knows that in Lehi's original dream, Nephi partook of the fruit.
Yeah, so those that want a dream Nephi to partake of dream fruit can check that box.
It's also a category error to confuse participants with observers. Nephi was shown glimpses of Lehi's dream, like watching a film, watching a movie. Lehi was asleep in the dream, walking around in the dark. Nephi was not. So asking Nephi, who's not a participant, but only an observer, to want to be eating the fruit, it's like if we're watching Ratatouille and asking to eat the Ratatouille in the movie. Only the characters in the movie can eat the food in the movie. We're
not in it. Yes. And Nephi saw lots of things. Nephi also didn't ask to hold baby Jesus when he saw him. Why not? That'd be a nice thing to do. That was his chance. No, that wasn't his chance. He wasn't actually there. Maybe this should have been first, but to be clear, the scriptures don't tell us why the Spirit of the Lord left. So any explanation about this is speculative, and some have taught this theory as though it is definitive.
The scripture does not say.
Not at all. Look, we don't know anything about divine beings and how they travel, what makes them come and go. Like, who are we to presume in this case we know something about why the Spirit of the Lord would leave? So why did Angel Moroni come 4 times to Joseph Smith and not 3 or 7 or 20? Like, we have no idea.
Look, as long as we're just making things up about why the Spirit left and the angel came, what if the angel is one of Nephi's ancestors and requested special dispensation to show him the history of the Nephites?
Sure.
I mean, there's as much evidence for that as for anything. I can make that up too. There's no reason to make something up that is critical of Nephi when there's nothing else in the text to suggest that he's doing anything wrong. Yeah. On the contrary, Nephi is in the middle of having one of the most profound visions we know of in any recorded scripture.
We're supposed to believe this is something less than what the Lord had in mind for Nephi.
This is his punishment.
This is plan B. Yeah, this is his punishment.
Yeah, just one of the greatest we'll ever give to human beings in the history of Earth.
part of the theory is contrasting Lehi's approach with Nephi's approach. Lehi tasted the fruit, Nephi didn't. It's experience versus understanding. And to my knowledge, those that espouse this theory have never acknowledged or let alone tried to explain the fact that there was also a divine being in Lehi's experience that seems to have disappeared. So you don't get to just shrug your shoulders when it happens to Lehi and then invent something derogatory, no less, when it happens to Nephi. Either they both get besmirched, or better, I would say, they both get a shoulder shrug. We see something similar in John the Revelator's experience, where he communicates with multiple heavenly beings, starting in chapter 1 with a voice identifying himself as Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. But then in chapter 5, it's one of the 24 elders that speaks to John. In chapter 6, each of the 4 beasts speaks to John as seals are opened, come and see. Then in chapter 10, John receives instruction from the voice which I heard from heaven, and then gets instruction from another angel. In chapter 17, one of the 7 angels that has the 7 vials speaks with John and shows him events concerning the great whore. Then in chapter 21, he that sat upon the throne speaks to John, followed again by one of the 7 angels, and shows him several sacred events. Woo! So, either John offended heavenly being after heavenly being after heavenly being, or God has his reasons for which divine being says what. I'm going to stick with the latter.
As long as we're talking about differences between Nephi and Lehi's experience, Lehi also just had a dream while he was asleep, and the Lord had important information to give to him, but they gave to him in this symbolic fashion. Nephi sought, not necessarily a vision, but he wanted to understand. That was the entire purpose of his prayer, was to get understanding. So it seems very odd that if Nephi gets this vision in response to the fact that he was wanting to understand what his father's vision meant, that they would then assume that the Spirit is unhappy with him for saying, yeah, understanding is the thing I'm wanting. That's how it started. He hasn't changed. Nephi didn't change his mind.
In general, we should all be careful about other people's spiritual experiences. I don't go up to somebody after a sacrament meeting talk and say, well, I can appreciate why that spiritual experience meant so much to you, but if it were me, I would have done this instead. That's not fair to that person. I don't know their heart. I don't know the situation. I suppose it's easy on the one hand to say, boy, had I been the brother of Jared, I would have asked for this instead. But really, I've never seen an angel, so who am I?
It's certainly not to second guess prophets who are reporting on their spiritual experiences.
Yeah. We've been counseled by our modern leaders over and over again that we should pray for a greater understanding of the scriptures. I'm not aware of any counsel that we should pray to re-experience things that happen in the scriptures, that we should try to have the same dreams as opposed to understand them. If you've had a teaching calling in the church, you might have had an occasion to teach Revelation or Daniel or another visionary account. And part of the upshot of this argument is that if you haven't been praying to relive it, you've been wrong. Maybe that's the case, but I haven't seen anybody teach that.
I've certainly never thought to do that. There is an assertion in this critical argument that experience is always better than understanding.
Or at least in this case, it's better.
Or at least in this case, that experience would be better. In any place that I have encountered this criticism of Nephi, I have never seen anyone defend that assertion. I feel like if you want to claim that, which may be correct, but I think you'd be well served to explain why experience is better than understanding. We actually have lots of examples in the scriptures and in words from the prophets where we are told to seek understanding. We were told to study things. So simply saying experience is better than understanding isn't enough. Why in this case would it be more important for Nephi to be a participant in the dream rather than an observer? He already believed the vision itself had happened. It's not obvious how Nephi would have been better off if he had experienced it himself. Having 2 people have exactly the same experience wouldn't have helped us at all. And yet, because Nephi prayed and asked for understanding, we now have, how many chapters is it? Like 11 to 14?
Yeah.
Explaining all of these things, which then we wouldn't know how important Lehi's dream is.
We'd still be debating, what does the tree represent? What is that building? And immediately around him, his brothers, who they seem to have taken Lehi's dream and his subsequent teaching seriously, but they didn't understand it. Nephi goes back in chapter 15 to find them disputing. Nephi's inspired understanding of the vision blessed them profoundly. He was able to answer their questions, and it says they humbled themselves before the Lord, and Nephi had great hopes for them. It was way better for them, and let me let Nephi got understanding instead of just having the same experience and going back and telling them, yep, I saw it too.
Or worse, going back and saying, yep, I tasted it too. It sure was yummy.
Yeah.
They're still saying,
Yes.
I know the dream fruit is yummy. What is it supposed to mean to me? Nephi is telling us what that means. Millions of people have benefited from that. If nothing else, understanding has a wider application. One person can have a vision, and then millions of people can have the understanding that came from that vision. And there may be many, many times in our lives where it's important that we experience things for ourselves. And I agree with that, but I don't think this story is an example of that happening. You know, as we've gone through this, we really want to be fair to the original argument. In fact, a lot of the time in our podcast, we come across things that we don't agree with. You know, sometimes in talking about it, we discover that there really is a point. We try to be really fair and give their argument the best opportunity it has. And I think this is a case of that. Maybe the best thing would have been for Nephi to ask for both. Maybe that's an argument you could make, you know, and embrace both sides of what we're talking about. But even that is really hard to argue for because it still has Nephi asking to taste fruit that he knows is metaphorical. Did Nephi drive away the Spirit of the Lord?
No, this speculative theory seems not at all to be supported by the scriptures and doesn't even seem to really make sense. We have made 13 different arguments to show this. We won't recap them all here, but they are briefly summarized on the screen. Among the points are that awake Nephi cannot partake of dream fruit. Nephi had partaken of the fruit in Lehi's dream, and more importantly, Nephi had partaken of the fruit symbolically.
There's no indication that Nephi did anything that he needed to apologize for, and there's no reason for us to be criticizing him for it.
We hope this helps you come unto Jesus Christ by studying the scriptures and sustaining and following his prophets.